עצביהם כסף וזהב, מעשה ידי אדם. עצביהם כסף וזהב, מעשה ידי אדם.
What a wonderful turnout. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming tonight. I want to give special recognition to the Israel Affairs Committee of Beth Tikvah Synagogue, to Gail Kurtzman and the rest of our office staff for helping to organize tonight's program. I thanked you. And the rest of the office. Who else do I have to thank? I thanked the Israel Affairs. I thanked you. Great. You know, I'll thank soon, at the end. This has been, as some of you, I'm Rabbi Jared Grover, for those of you I haven't met yet. I'm pleased to welcome you all, those I know, and some new faces who are here today, too, for what I hope will be a fruitful exploration and conversation about the state that we love and care about so much. Just before I introduce our speaker, I want to give you a bit of a background for today's conversation, and maybe it will help you too, Vivian, to understand the challenge of synagogues in dealing with this crisis. We have, since January, all seen the citizens of Israel fighting on the streets, breaking out in chants and protests and screams of revolution. And it has been very difficult for us to watch, those of us who pray for the welfare of the state, which is tied up in its unity. Those of us who know about the external threats that the country faces can't help but feel desperation, seeing the country focused again on internal threats when it has so much else to worry about. And this sort of discussion about what is an internal Israeli issue that needs to be resolved by Israelis, which really diaspora Jews shouldn't get involved in, and what is an issue that is crucial to the well-being of the Jewish people everywhere that involves the state of Israel, and that might invite the diaspora Jews, diaspora Jewry to become informed of and to partake in and to participate in, to raise our voices. And we've been stuck, I think, on this issue. I personally have been stuck. I think that our synagogue, which is now 60 years old, very much tied up in the history of the state, Beth Tikvah, very much tied up in the history of state since the beginning, is very comfortable being in the position of rah-rah Israel and down with anti-Semitism and down with our enemies. But this is a tough one. In the Reform synagogues, I find they've had a much easier time jumping on the anti-Netanyahu bandwagon. The Orthodox synagogues have had a much more easy time jumping on the pro-Netanyahu bandwagon. But colleagues in the conservative movement and myself could use help and advice and education from as many voices as possible regarding the question of how we ought to be involved on an issue that seems that is so painful and that seems to be to have staying power beyond that which I would have expected at the beginning. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Can I just jump in and make really,
sure.
I think, important comments?
Okay.
One is
I want to introduce you
I
first.
know, you'll get to it. I'm out there every Saturday night and more, and I've never heard cries or screams for revolution, just to be very clear. And everything has been nonviolent. The other thing I want to make that I think is really important is this is not about loving Bibi or hating Bibi. It's way bigger than Bibi.
Right.
So you just made a comment about, in Reform synagogues, they can more easily kind of jump on the anti-Bibi bandwagon, and in the Orthodox, they're more pro. I think it's
For you, it's pro-democracy.
Correct.
Anti-democracy. And I'll give you a chance to explain.
Yeah, we'll
I know,
liberal
I know what you're going to say.
It's not about Bibi. It's just not that simple.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, he is in it, but,
That's fair. all I wanted to present was, this is a very active, live, painful, serious issue for the community, for its rabbis, messy. We're trying to figure out how to navigate this. Federations are trying to figure out how to navigate this. We have a lot of people calling for a more active voice, and a lot of people saying, stay out of it. This is an internal Israeli dispute, and synagogues and federations are meant to be non-political organizations. So I'm grateful to have a very wise, insightful voice, passionate, outspoken, who we've been lucky to have at Beth Tikvah before. Vivian Bercovici, as you all know, is the former Canadian ambassador to Israel under Prime Minister Stephen Harper. I was sorry, I saw Vivian last week. Last time she was here, she brought her mother along, and your mother was at that time, how old was she? 90?
Early 90s.
Early 90s. And this adorable Jewish mother, and it was so cute having you and her here together. And I asked Vivian for an update, and she let me know, unfortunately, that her mother passed away this summer. Still, having you back here brings her memory to mind. I hope it does for you too.
Well, can I? Yeah, I have to. You
Okay.
can't do that because I have my fabulous cousins from my mom's side who are here tonight, sort of carrying the family torch. And
That's great.
It's wonderful, yes, and I'm really glad they're here. And she was this adorable little person in the front row, and I introduced her to the room. But the best part was before we came, we took her out for dinner to Panzer's, and really, my mother, like, she just never understood where she got me, but a corned beef, she ate a whole corned beef sandwich, a whole knish, and the soup. And then we came here. Over to you, Rabbi.
So we wish you condolences. You're in
Thank
the year
you.
of mourning for your mom. And I bless you with good memories of your mother, and I'm glad there's people here from your family bringing her memory to mind. So Vivian, I like hearing from her because she speaks truthfully and directly and honestly. She gets herself in trouble. I like people like that. And she's passionate, as I mentioned. I don't think anyone is going to question her commitment to the welfare of the Jewish people and the state of Israel. She's demonstrated it throughout her life, and she demonstrates it every day. All you have to do is read her blog called The State of Tel Aviv, and you can subscribe, by the way, to get regular updates on Vivian's thoughts. She's also remains a prolific and valuable contributor to a number of Canadian media outlets, and I think we should all consider ourselves lucky to have an advocate like Vivian for the Jewish community in this country. So she lives in Tel Aviv, but spends a good amount of time in Canada. In recent years, she's been engaged in independent business consulting, board work, and has written those political columns in the Jerusalem Post, the National Post, Commentary Magazine, Newsweek, the Wall Street Journal, The Hub, and others. She appears frequently on television and radio in Hebrew and English, and particularly enjoys public speaking engagements. In May 2022, she founded thestateoftelaviv.com and SLTV, publishing written articles and a podcast focusing exclusively on Israel and Jewish life. She practiced law for 25 years before she was appointed ambassador. Her practice focused on media defense, financial services, governance, and representing Canada in negotiations with First Nations regarding land claims. She does not miss the Canadian winter.
All true.
So let's get into this, Vivian. Tell us where we've been and where we're at now. These are weekly protests. You said you're there every week. And from what I understand, we're getting to a showdown point where things are likely to get worse before they get better. Is that accurate?
So yeah, there's a lot you threw out there. With respect to, we've been waiting for the showdown since January. It just keeps kind of creeping out of reach. So but it's going to be a very busy, intense fall and winter. That's for sure.
Tell us why. So tell us why. Is that because the Supreme Court is now hearing arguments challenging the validity of the new law that was passed by the Knesset?
Yes and no. So, I mean, like everything you said, like everything, we're Jews, right? It's messy. Everything's messy. Right. How involved or not involved, diaspora communities should be, which we'll get to, I'm sure, is messy. And in Israel, it's messy. There are no clear lines, demarcations. There is one for me, and I think many Israelis, though, which is democracy, liberal democracy. So, yes, the Supreme Court, look, they heard the challenge on September 12th. Before the Supreme Court of Israel, there were a number of parties who said, look, the reasonableness law, which the Knesset passed on July 24th, it just can't stand, and so they challenged it, and they bring applications to the Supreme Court. That hearing went on for 13 and a half hours, and I actually did watch, not all of it, but a lot of it on television. And it was, I'm sure, not nearly as watched as was the Eichmann trial, however many decades ago, but all day long, the major television stations in Israel broadcast that thing uninterrupted, which is extraordinary. I mean, that tells you something about the level of engagement. And I'll tell you, like, it was pretty riveting. I mean, it was very technical, very legalese. Okay, I'm a lawyer, I got off on it. But people were watching this. The TV stations did not broadcast this to empty rooms or to non-audiences. They have to, Esther Hayut, who resigns, I think maybe it was today or tomorrow, like imminently, she steps down, she retires from the bench, she is the Chief Justice. And because of that, we know that we have to have at the outside a decision rendered by mid-January, because it has to be within 3 months of her retirement. I expect they'll expedite that decision. I expect that we'll probably get something, let's say November-ish. And I'm not predicting, I'm just kind of, musing. I think that they're smart. The court's smart. They're not going to strike it down totally. They're not going to let it pass totally. They're going to say, on the one hand, on the other hand, and they're going to send it back to the Knesset to be reconsidered. They're going to buy time, right, for a whole bunch of reasons. And so that's one of the showdowns that people are expecting. Oh, the Supreme Court's going to do X, and then the situation will be clear. That's one factor that we're kind of working with now. I think a more significant factor is the straight-up politics, okay? And so, we have the Haredim, the ultra-Orthodox, they've been kind of upping the ante in the last few weeks and just in the last few days, making some rather bold comments. And they're very, very frustrated because they're in this government for two reasons. They're not Zionists. Let's be clear and open about it. They'll tell you that themselves. These are the ultra-Orthodox. They're Hasidim. They're Lithuanian. They tend to wear, the black coats and black hats, and they're what we call Haredim in Israel, which is, literally to tremble, right? There's a whole other camp of very religious, which is religious Zionists. And one of the things I've learned over the last 2 months when I've been around North America, a lot of time in Toronto and area, is that a lot of North Americans don't understand the difference between religious Zionist camps and Haredi camps. And so that may be something we want to touch on at some point. Yeah. But the Haredim are in this government and supporting this government for two reasons. You know how, the coalition leaders, including Netanyahu, like to talk about this as being a right-wing government, a right-wing bloc. There is nothing right-wing about the Haredim, nothing. And in fact, the Shas party, which is a Haredi party, which its constituents is North African, Mizrahi and Sephardic Jews primarily, they tend to be left, frankly. I mean, their policies are leftish. They're more towards the socialist side of things. The European, the Ashkenaz Haredim, ultra-Orthodox, do not have an economic platform that I have ever seen or heard. They don't care about defense, and they don't get involved in foreign affairs. There is nothing right-wing about them. They want two things. They want a permanent, forever exemption enshrined in law from serving in the army or national service. They want the study of Torah to be elevated in law, to be at least as important as service in the army or national service. And they want money. They want money. I mean, it's that, but it's that situation. They comprise today 13% of the population. Their fertility rate is 8 children per family. In 30 years, they're going to be 30+% of the population. Keep in mind that 20% of the population is Arab. And so you do the math. Economically, it's just not sustainable. And the model which the Haredim, the ultra-Orthodox, have built in Israel, which is that the men, most of them, choose not to work. They study full-time in yeshiva or kollel. They don't serve in the army. They don't do national service. And they receive stipends from the government. And one of the things this government has done is ballooned the stipends, the allowances that they receive, ballooned. And kollel students now actually receive more money than do soldiers. And I mean, that's just wrong to me. I mean, maybe other people feel differently. I feel very strongly about that. And so they're in it because they have received enormous economic benefit, which is straight up money and payments so that they don't have to work. And another big issue for them in education is, there is no greater value in life than to study Torah. Okay, that we don't have this model of Judaism ever in the history of Judaism where people don't work. In the shtetl there was like the Talmud Chacham, right? And the whole community would rally around this genius of the community, and so they could go and study, all of the Jewish texts to ensure that there was a reservoir of knowledge in the community, right? To keep you Jewish, and so people would be informed. But the whole community wasn't sitting there studying all day long. Right? This is and I can get into that if you want, because this is a Faustian bargain Ben-Gurion made at the founding of the state that kind of got out of control. But here, one last thought. The other big win that the Haredim got from this government is that no Haredi students are required any longer to learn math, English, or science. Ensuring that they are unemployable for life and dependent upon the state. Now, there's all kinds of power politics and dynamics with the rabbis having this, poverty-stricken, huge, dependent constituency that votes as it's told, for the most part. In Bnei Brak, which is a suburb of Tel Aviv, you know what the voter turnout is typically in every election in Bnei Brak? It's like 105 to 110%, I swear. For real. We've now got another generation of Haredi men who are not going to have basic skills. They won't even be able to deliver pizzas, never mind get better work. And, it's just everything. It's economics, it's politics, it's...
Well, it sounds to me for you...
the basis of the state.
Right, so it sounds to me like for you, that's where the real crisis is for the future, or that's where the real threat is coming from. It's not the judicial reform, which you seem to say will get kicked down the road. It probably will wait until a future election and is likely to go nowhere.
No. Let me just sort of finesse that a touch. I think the judicial reform is hugely problematic, hugely. The reasonableness law that we're fighting over right now, that was passed in the Knesset on the 24th of July, that the Supreme Court now has a chance to roll back.
Right.
And the Knesset has already said, Yariv Levin, he's the Minister of Justice, he's already said, yeah, well, whatevs. Pardon me, but, didn't say the word, but they've made very clear, many of the key members in this government, we don't care what the court says, we're not listening to them. So this judicial reform initiative, overhaul, whatever you want to call it, is huge, huge. Do we need judicial reform? You bet. We need all kinds of judicial reform. We need educational reform. We need all kinds of reform. But the way in which this government has gone about doing it, without a mandate from the people, I might add, I want to deal with that, we were elected, we have a majority thing.
Right.
I want to deal with that fallacy. But, so yes, judicial reform is a huge issue. The Haredim, I actually think, are very easy, relatively, to deal with. On the kind of issue matrix or the problems that Israel has at the moment, they're not the biggest. The biggest, in my view, is the religious Zionist camp, the settlers in the West Bank. And there are now, I think, I was just reading today, the number that's been used is 150,000 in the ring around Jerusalem, and they're not going anywhere ever, okay? And I'm good with that. But in the West Bank, over the Green Line, and I know I am not here advocating for one state, two state, anything in particular, I'm just pointing out that there are now over 400,000 Jews living in settlements on the other side of the Green Line in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, whatever you want to call it. That's the much bigger problem.
Help me understand why, for you, that's a problem.
So
these serve in the army.
Yes and no.
They work.
Yes and no.
Okay.
Okay. So religious Zionists currently in the Knesset, they control 14 seats, but they have tremendous power. There are three parties that kind of banded together for the elections. It's so crazy what happens in Israel. And it's Bezalel Smotrich, which may be a familiar name to you. He is our Minister of Finance. Itamar Ben-Gvir, who is our Minister of National Security. Ironically, he's had a number of convictions for terrorist activity. Neither of those two gentlemen actually served in the IDF. Smotrich did a few months at some point. Ben-Gvir was rejected because he was an extremist in the early 90s. He was and remains a disciple of Rabbi Kahana, who was the Kach movement.
So for you, it's the threat. Their threat is ideological.
Their threat, for me, they call them chardalim. Chardal in Hebrew is just like mustard, hot mustard, and they are as religious as the ultra-Orthodox, but they're messianist, not messianic, messianist. They believe that their duty, their birthright, is to settle all of ancient Israel. And they would annex all of the West Bank tomorrow. They are very aggressive, in my view, in the way in which they treat and mistreat Palestinians who were there. Like, you can't, whatever you think, you can't will them away. We can't deny realities that are there. And they don't all, a lot of them, most of them serve in the army. It's interesting that there's 70% of the officers in combat troops are from like the settlement or the religious Zionist movement, which is really interesting. 30, 40 years ago, it was all kibbutzniks and right. But now the elite units are intelligence, Air Force, and elite combat, and they aren't in those units. Mm-hmm. And that tells you a lot. Some people will say, oh, that's because the Army is racist. I would suggest that there could be other reasons as well.
So for you, they pose the ideological threat.
Correct.
The Haredim pose the economic threat.
They're primarily an economic issue for me. I mean, I think that with the Haredim, they're really easy, and other governments have that. We can see there are it's all graft. Sometimes governments reduce their stipends, and their participation in the workforce shoots up, and then they give them more money, and it goes way down, and it's all graft. It's out there.
And together with the judicial reform, there's it all equals to a threat to liberal democracy.
So, yes, the Haredim, the army actually, they'll say this, generals and many people in the army's not dying to recruit them all, okay? However, it's just seen to be profoundly unfair by many people that they can go and they can do national service. My daughter did national service.
Right.
She didn't do the army, which means you volunteer, 1 or 2 years of your life, and you, whatever you want to do, whether it's working in hospitals or with children or with the elderly, you work for free. You give to the state. There's no reason they can't be participating in that way, and then go to work, just like everybody else. So I think that they are, as a group, much easier to address. They don't live in the West Bank. They don't live in settlements. I really do think it's primarily an economic issue. With the religious Zionists, they're not leaving the West Bank.
Right.
Okay? And so a lot of Israelis and Israelis from left to right, religious, non-religious, and everything in between, and I would suggest that it's the big middle that's kind of getting squashed at the moment. And they say, and right-wing politicians too, we fell asleep. We just fell asleep for 40 years. We didn't pay attention. We had those 2 wars that nearly ended us, 67, 73. We had Lebanon 1. We had the first Intifada.
We didn't pay attention to the domestic issues.
We didn't.
Right.
And we didn't. You know what? People were just busy building lives and catching their breath between intifadas.
So many people have commented that what we're seeing now is the culmination of these decades
Neglect.
of ignoring the fundamental internal issues which have plagued the country from the beginning since we decided, or Israel decided, to put off the writing of a constitution. The chickens have now come home to roost.
Absolutely.
So let me ask you something. I want to play with an idea you said earlier about how the composition of combat soldiers has changed over time.
That's actually a juicy fact.
In addition to the way the country has changed over time, the demographics of the country. So you know what your opponents are saying. They're saying your version of Zionism, Ashkenazi, Tel Aviv, secular, had its day, but pure demographics suggest that day is coming to an end. The composition of the country has changed. It is now more religious, less Ashkenazi, less Tel Aviv, more Jerusalem and its surroundings. And you haven't come to terms with that. You're fighting. You're not pro-democracy. You're anti.
I'm an elitist.
You're anti-democracy because you're not coming to terms with the way the values of the country have changed. So how do you respond
I have so
to
many
those?
responses.
Okay, so that's my job, is to provoke.
My cup runneth over. How do I respond? So firstly, I say, what you've just shared with me is basically page 1 of the playbook of the coalition government. Okay? They've tried every divisive tactic and trick in the book. First, we were all a bunch of leftist anarchists, which I kind of think is fun. Like, I'm usually called a right-wing lunatic extremist, so for me, I'm good with that. I'm a leftist anarchist. I wear it proudly. We're not.
But that's actually an important point. I talked to you about this last week, that some people have painted you now as a lefty.
I'm good with that.
Tell me the truth, Vivian.
No, look, I'm not a leftist. I don't...
Right, I just want people to hear that is such... Like, if you knew Vivian, that's pretty ridiculous.
It's fun. It's funny. I enjoy it. Listen, in all seriousness, I am not a leftist. There's not a left-wing bone in my body. I am as I see myself, and I know myself pretty well, unfortunately. And I'm Canadian. I'm a fiscal conservative, and I'm very socially progressive. And I am a liberal Democrat, and as my kids say, I'm on Zionist crack. So first, they started with we're all left-wing anarchists, right? And I'm there, and I'm in that 100,000 plus people, and it's hard work. I got to tell you, it's the luster has worn off. Our lives have totally changed, and the protests are not just on Saturdays. We got to freelance every once in a while when they do something really wacky. So it went from left-wing anarchists, elitists. We're all privileged. You name it. So what do I say? Number one, if I live in Israel, I live in the center of Tel Aviv, which is supposed to be like the crucible of all of this bad stuff, right? And guess what? It's just not true. The country is no longer, ruled by Ashkenaz elites. It is no longer a socialist kind of chokehold. I can't begin to tell you, if I think of my Israeli friends, and I socialize, most of my friends there are Israeli. I don't live in an English bubble or ghetto and just hang out with people who speak English, au contraire. And they're all mixes. Like, 40, 50 years ago, if someone Ashkenaz married someone Mizrahi, it was like scandal. Well, but like a lot of them did. There are everyone is a mix now. I don't know other than here. Like we got this whole pure Len thing going on here, this Ashkenaz thing.
I think particularly when Israelis look at the court, they say, these are not the faces that reflect the Israel of today.
Well, they can, and you know what, there's some truth to that, but I'll say this. I look at my court here, same thing. I'll tell you what I do look at. I look at my government today. I look at the government, and I don't see Israel in that government. I see all men. And the most important positions are all men.
Coalition.
Most of them had beards, yes. And so there are some photos of always Bibi with the top guys in his office, or whatever they're having, one of their important meetings. It's chilling. Yes, there are a few women in cabinet, but they're in like D-level positions. Sorry, but that's a fact. In terms of the court, yes, the court is. It's actually not overwhelming. I think it's probably about a third non-Ashkenaz now. There are Arabs on the Supreme Court. Ayelet Shaked and Gideon Sa'ar have, over the last 4 or 5 years, been the ministers of justice. They're right wing, okay? They're both former Likudniks who just can't work in the party anymore. They've appointed the judges. They did not appoint left wing, Tel Aviv types, to use that kind of caricature. So the court is diversifying, but these people are appointed for life. You can't just, knock them off, right? I mean, you do have to wait for them to pass on and to leave the bench. And, there are Aaron Barak, who was the Chief Justice in the 90s, made a comment once, I'd love to have more Mizrahim on the bench, but, there aren't qualified people, and he's taken tremendous flack for that comment. And I don't know. I don't know what the demographics were of what, qualified law school graduates, judges, whatever, but I can tell you, that's changing rapidly. Not just in law, by the way. Bank CEOs, tech CEOs, some of the key the leaders of security services in Israel, other key positions. And apropos that comment, that we're all a bunch of leftist anarchists who are, elitists and we don't care. This is when I always take comfort, and I do have to share this with you. If I look around, who am I kind of, in bed with, metaphorically? Every living former prime minister of Israel, every living former head of the Mossad, Shin Bet, police forces, every single bank CEO, tech CEOs, entrepreneurs, I could go on, artists, I could go on and on and on. There is one person who was the AG in Israel in the early 2000s for, I think, a year or two, who has come out fully in support of judicial overhaul. That is incredible, what I've just said. Tamir Pardo, he was the head of Mossad for 4 or 5 years, and then it was Yossi Cohen, and who I know quite well from when I was in office and after. Yossi Cohen has come out. Yossi Cohen is a huge Bibi loyalist, huge. He has gone on the record, along with all of the other former heads of Mossad, saying this is really problematic, and we have to pause. Tamir Pardo, he did a big interview in the 60 Minutes of Israel. It's called Uvda, which means the fact. And if any of you understand his Hebrew well enough, I urge you to go on and it's what's her name? Alana Dayan. Yeah, she's a fantastic journalist, I think. And she did interviews last winter with Tamir Pardo, with Avichai Mandelblit, who was the Attorney General appointed by Bibi, on and on and on. These really right-wing, really smart, really senior people. And to a person, they said, former head of Shabak, this is we are really in danger zone here. And Tamir Pardo, these are people who came and their parents came and there was nothing. These are the people who built this country, truly sacrificed their lives, lost family and friends. And Tamir Pardo said, when Alana Diane says to him in his Tel Aviv flat, something about him being privileged, he's like, me? Privileged? Me? My mother who crawled out from under a pile of bodies, whatever, the story, I don't remember, like a horrible Holocaust story, and raised him on her own in it. Like, I'm privileged? Why? Because I worked hard and I've been successful? Which is probably something that could be said for every single person in this room, myself included. Really? Tamir Pardo is privileged and he's a leftist anarchist? Come on. We've got the people who are opposing this are right, left, everything in between, religious. In fact, many of the kind of the North American yeshiva U crowd, the knitted kippahs, but who live in Baca and Jerusalem and, work and do very well, they are not supporting this.
And to the challenge of, you're such a pro-Democrat.
I am.
Why ignore the will of the majority
I love
that voted?
I swear we didn't set this up.
That voted for this government. I understand in the circles you travel in Tel Aviv, it looks nice and mixed, but those people lost the election.
Right.
The people who won are the people you don't like, and in a democracy, and the people who see things differently than you. Let's put it that way.
I'm good with that. Some of my best friends are
in a
lefties.
democracy, the majority gets to set the agenda, and the minority has to accept. So help me understand a response to that claim.
With pleasure. So I love that one because it's a really fundamental, important question, and it's so often overlooked. So the judicial overhaul, whatever you want to call it, judicial reform, judicial overhaul program, plan, nobody ran on that platform except for the religious Zionists, the extremist Kahanists in the West Bank. They control 14 seats, and they ran on a lot of other really nasty policies that I'm willing to bet 99.9% of you would not approve. They control 14 out of 120 seats in the Knesset. They ran fully, openly, robustly on exactly what they're doing. And what's his name? Simcha Rotman, who is in the Religious Zionist Party under Bezalel Smotrich. This is his life's work. He's, North American parents, was born in Bnei Brak. He's very religious, and he has this bee in his bonnet, and he has had it for like 20, 25 years. I won't get into how badly they've handled it just as a government, but park that. No other party of 106 other seats in the Knesset, no other party, including Likud, ran on this platform. Okay? What did they run on? They ran on economic growth, security, boosting the tech industry. They ran on Iran and Saudi. Those were the main planks, and kind of reinforcing the Abraham Accords. And we had the election, and then Bibi has 2 months that he uses up every last minute of it to negotiate coalition agreements, right, with all of these parties. And in those coalition agreements, he basically negotiated away democracy and made all kinds of promises that, personally, I think, and I've had this discussion with many people in Israel, I think that President Herzog, probably that was his moment to, step in, but that's a whole other discussion. Once the coalition agreements...
You're disappointed in President Herzog.
Once the coalition agreements were signed, we learned literally the next day, Simcha Rotman came out and Yariv Levin, and they were like, yeah, we got this, man. Holding fully drafted legislation from courtesy of Kohelet Policy Forum. And they started to tell us what we were about to get. And it's like, wait, what? Now, I can tell you that the Likud primaries, when they select their leader, the major issue in Likud primaries was judicial reform. And that is why you have someone like Yariv Levin go from whatever he was, 15 to number 2 on the Likud list, and a jewel like Yuli Edelstein, former prisoner of conscience, go from number 2 to 13 or 14. But that's internal politics. They did not run on the policy. And there was Bibi with his coalition partners, the Haredim and the religious Zionists, doing this and saying, you got to honor what you promised. And what did he promise? The world, the moon. and they want delivery of their promises, and that's why the Haredim are really upping the ante on the draft law. They want that done.
Right.
They want that more than anything. The religious Zionists have a whole other list of goodies that they want, and they say, as you quite rightly note, this is democracy. Tough luck. We won. We're a majority. See you later, alligator. Well, not quite. Democracy is not about majority in the legislature. That's why in Canada, God forbid we would have. Why don't you get it or whatever? We would, imagine if in Canada we have some wacky law, and we've had a few wacky laws come into the House lately, and a majority passes it, and that's it. There's no Senate consideration. There's no opportunity to appeal to a higher court. Nothing. That's it. 61, they want this override, which is part of their big reform package. One day they say we're against it, one day they say we're for it. That's just playing to pandering to the North American press. 61 out of 120 Knesset members could vote on any law, and the Supreme Court would have no voice in judicially reviewing it, and there's no one else. There's nowhere else to go.
Some say that was just put forward as an initial starting point of negotiation, but I think it's important
that's not true.
I think it's important that we hear, Vivian said, it's not that the country, a significant part of the country, is opposed to judicial reform. I think you recognize there is a problem. The court has too much power the way it's currently constituted. There should be some tweaks. But the way that this will, am I misstating you?
I'm not nuts about the way you phrased it, but I'll live with it.
You'll live with it, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think you could say a majority of the country for a while now, left-wing and right-wing governments have seen we need some tighter rules around the Supreme Court and how it operates, but it's the way the current government went ahead. It's sort of surprising the people with very extreme proposals of reforms that frightened the country.
Well, and they didn't have the mandate. I mean, so first of all, one of their big bugaboos, which honestly I can't even, whatever, is the judicial appointment process, which is very flawed and very inside baseball, and yes, it's bad. Okay? But show me a democracy with a with a good judicial appointment process. I'm here. Anybody have any great? Ours is the stroke of a pen. It's Justin, that's it. It's it. Yeah. There is no committee, there is no oversight, there's no accountability, there's nothing. And his top criteria for appointment to the Supreme Court of Canada is you got to be First Nation and fluent in French. I mean, whatever, that's great, but I'm kind of really also focused on jurisprudential chops.
Right.
So the judicial appointment process is deeply problematic in Israel. But I know that no matter what it's replaced with, it will be deeply problematic.
Right.
That excites me the least. What excites me much more is stripping the court of jurisdiction, legal jurisdiction, to review crazy decisions. Can I give you one example?
Sure.
Because, we need reform.
And Bibi says he doesn't want that. He wants a court. The pendulum has swung too far to one side. He wants to bring it back to the middle.
And
you don't
know
buy
that
it.
Bibi says really different things in English and in Hebrew. And
I've heard
that Bibi doesn't speak to the Israeli press. He does not speak to the Israeli press. Got that? And then we watch these interviews and we're like, what? And keep in mind that most of his voters, most of the people supporting this coalition, do not understand English media. Okay? So that's just kind of fun and games. But let me really bring to life this really quite technical, sleepy, boring legal issue, reasonableness law, right? So Bibi says, it's no big deal. We passed it in the Knesset on July 24th. The whole country went crazy, myself included. But it's nothing. It's meaningless. It's just we're just throwing them a crumb. Well, it's not meaningless, and I'll tell you why he wants that law in place so badly. What that law does is it gives to the Supreme Court the ability to look at a decision made by the executive branch of government, and if it is, really off the charts, extremely unreasonable, egregiously unreasonable, which is by the law, a common law standard, that is applied in our courts here. Okay, it's nothing that was invented by some crazy judge on the Israeli Supreme Court bench. Has it been taken too far at times? Maybe, but here was the situation: Aryeh Deri, 11 seats, head of the Shas party, like Mizrahi, Sephardic, ultra-Orthodox. 11 seats in the Knesset. Aryeh Deri was convicted of crimes of moral turpitude, corruption. He served 2 years in jail from 1999 to 2001. He was put on ice
I think
officially.
several times he was convicted.
Put on ice, indulge me, put on ice politically for 10 years, but he was really still running the party. Comes back in the next day after his timeout is the penalty box. His timeout is over, he comes back in, he's running the party again. In no time, guess what? Deri's charged again with corruption-related charges. In February 22, it's 23 now? Yeah, February 22, I think that was after election 4 or something, I don't know, maybe election 5. Deri goes before a judge of the Jerusalem District Court, and he pleads to these corruption-related offenses. This is the second go. And he says, listen, guys, like, I'm out. I'm not doing this politics thing anymore. I'm retiring. And so the judges grant him leniency. They say, you know what? Fine. Goodbye. We're not going to put you in jail again. We're going to let you go with a little slap on the wrist. Guess what? Like, basically the next day, Deri says, haha, kidding, I'm back. Seriously, he says, I didn't say I was out forever. It was a misunderstanding. He runs, he gets 11 seats. Guess what Bibi does? Deri negotiates. He wants two portfolios for himself, never mind the other guys in his party, okay? And what does he want, and what does he get? He gets Ministry of the Interior, which is hugely powerful in Israel, and Ministry of Health, because he has such a great medical background. But Deri gets this, his other guys, his crew, they get other portfolios, and the country goes crazy. We're like, really? Really? We can't do better than this? Oh, and by the way, 2 years down the road, he's going to get financed. Smotrich is going to be out. And we're going to have a guy with multiple convictions of tax evasion, fraud, and corruption running finance. Okay? So goes to the Supreme Court. Guess what they say? This is really, this is when I would use the F-bomb, but I won't. This is really unreasonable. It's unreasonable. And, Bibi and government, if you don't have the seichel to recognize that, we're going to tell you this is not cool. And you know who the hardest judges were? The toughest on Deri and Bibi? The right-wing judges and the religious judges. They went crazy. They said, a man of this character should be in positions of the highest public trust. It's outrageous. Goodbye. So guess what? Bibi said, okay, we're just going to go back to the Knesset and we're going to pass a law so we can get around you, court. And that's what this is all about. And even Deri sees that this is getting a little stinky. And he said, you know what, I think I'm going to resign from politics again. What else? I mean, but this is what we're dealing with. We have the top government officials, most of them have been convicted of criminal offenses, and they're violent. They're violent. When there were those riots in the West Bank and settlers angry as can be over these murders, which are horrible, and we're in a terrible cycle of violence, but they went and openly for a week were burning down villages of civilians. And do you know what their leader, Bezalel Smotrich, said? We should burn down the whole village. This is my Minister of Finance. So, sorry, I think it's really important to understand this isn't a bunch of like cafe latte drinking Tel Avivis who are getting all exercised. This is real.
Yeah.
This is important, and the world is watching us.
Yeah, and you're not the only one, Vivian, who I think in the past, since January, has called for diaspora Jews to recognize the urgency of this moment.
It's 1948.
I want to switch, because we're limited in time, to that discussion.
I could stay all night. I'm happy for you.
You know this famous letter that Danny Gordis and Mati Friedman, who was here last year, and Yossi Klein Halevi wrote to diaspora Jewry, calling for diaspora Jewry to get involved and saying in a very eloquent letter, this is different.
Oh, I know that letter. Yeah.
This time it's different. You know, usually we tell you to stay out, but now we need you to get involved. So you say you know that letter.
I do.
Are you on the same page? Do you believe, I mean, I've read your stuff, I know you believe this, so, but help us understand.
It's a lob.
You come from the same point of view.
Yeah,
doesn't part of you say, look, you live in Israel now. This is your country.
Yeah, it's skin in the game.
Do you really want North American Jews and their biases and misunderstandings of Israel, do you really want their voices loudly pressuring domestic governments? Right? You saw there's a lot of pressure on Joe Biden to get involved, but Trudeau as well, pressuring their domestic governments to raise their voices and get involved in what some are saying is an internal Israeli issue.
Okay, so first, my only issue with the letter, it's a great letter, but I've said to the guys personally, you really should have had a girl on there. It didn't have to be me, but especially given the issues that we feel are threatened, minority rights, women's rights, things like that.
Right.
We don't need 3 North American guys speaking for us. I just thought that was an error on their part.
Okay.
But great guys, good message and all that. Do we want North Americans meddling in our politics?
You know what it means. It means
yeah.
Justin Trudeau.
Oh.
Well, that's what I want you to recognize that. Like, if you want North American Jews, that includes Canadian Jews.
Is he Jewish?
It includes Canadian Jews. No, but there are those, calling for increasing pressure on the Liberal government of Canada to use its influence, and let's not go there.
Can you rephrase
to use
the
its global influence to pressure the Israelis to get their act together.
Okay, so I'm just going to work with that loosely. Okay. I think that it's a really important issue, and I do feel that this is, and it's not just me being hysterical. Many Israelis who, military guys and girls, this is 1948. They feel it's even more dire in many ways than 1973 because, again, it is from within. Okay? We're really good at dealing with threats from without. We're not so good at dealing with issues within. I feel very strongly.
What do you mean by that it's 1948? You're saying...
It's existential what we're going through right now because, it's real. Like, people are leaving. 40% of the Jews, like the non-Haredi Jews, there was a number I saw recently, have second passports or are getting them. There's a surge in second... It's all people talk about. Do you have a second passport? It's real. It's real. I know people who have left. And these aren't, one of them is a friend of mine, and his grandmother's a Holocaust survivor. I mean, this is tearing families apart. Families are being torn apart. And his grandmother, survivor, says, it breaks my heart, but I understand. They're horrified by what they're seeing happening in the country. But I want to stay focused on your very important question that you raised. I don't want to see anyone meddling. What I do want to see, and I've been here now for close to 2 months, both Toronto-ish and the States and around, and talking to lots of different people. I'd like to see the level of knowledge about what's going on. I'd like to see the bar raised a lot higher than I think it is, generally. I'd like people, not just Jews, but Jews especially, to understand how important this is, and that as goes Israel, so goes your life. I believe that. Maybe not everybody does, but I do. I think that we could, if this sort of reform and room accommodation to the groups that we're seeing being accommodated in society continues, we will have a very different Israel in 10 years, and not a lot of people. One of the articles I wrote about recently, my fridge guy, I swear my fridge guy, my appliance guy, he has like an engineering degree from MIT. He went to the Technion. Okay, he comes, he's an amazing guy. He's also really good with appliances. And he said, his 3 kids, they're all going to leave. No one's going to want to live here anymore. It's not going to be any fun. Mm-hmm. Who's going to choose? I chose to be there. I chose to be there. There is no economic advantage. I go crazy. People are loud. I mean, really. But I'm there because I believe in the place, and I think it's really important. What do we need? We need 1 million North Americans to come, just like the Russians did. So when you ask me, do I want people meddling? I'd love them to come, but that's not going to happen, right? Okay. So then realistically, I see Israel, and so does Joe Biden and many other people, as a geopolitical asset. Okay, forget all the Jewish stuff. It is a really important geopolitical asset globally. If we lose a democratic Israel and a regional superpower Israel, that has geopolitical implications that I don't even want to, and you don't want to think about. As Jews, I'd love to see people take a position. I'd love to see people take a position from knowledge and get involved, and some do. Many, many delegations that have come over in the last 8 months, you know what they do on Saturday nights? They go out for dinner. No, they go out for dinner. I have friends who have brought missions over. I'm like, what are you doing? This is history. This is like coming here in 1948 and pretending there's not a war going on. How can, it's incomprehensible to me. Mm-hmm. We need to learn, we need to get involved, we need to advocate. Many people since I've come here have talked to me about petitions and letters. Honestly, nobody reads your petitions. Nobody. Okay? I'm telling you right now. In the Canadian Jewish News, Ellen Besner, who I adore, and I've done a few podcasts with her, and there was some big petition that was signed by a whole bunch of people in Canada, and we were talking about what was going on in Israel at the time, and she was asking about the reaction of the Israeli media and population to these Canadian petitions. I'm like, really? Like, nobody cares. Mm-hmm. They don't. It's just like things there are so urgent. Do you really think that people are reading petitions? Come over, get in the muck with us, get in the protests, get informed. I've had so many people challenge me on really very basic issues. And I know that it's just because they don't understand. You have to take the time to read about it, to know, so that you can understand. These are really important issues. If Ben Gurion was here, I saw his portrait up and, I was in the back room, right? Mm-hmm. Nothing exciting. But I'll tell you, he is rolling. He's rolling. He is the author of a lot of this, but he founded, and I did a lot of work on the Declaration of Independence last year in a podcast, fantastic book written by 2 Canadian guys. And, Ben Gurion said, it doesn't say, the Declaration of Independence does not say liberal and democratic, but it says everything around it, okay? Just not those words, but all of the principles, ideas, and everything. And when, people were saying, hey, because they called him old man, right? That, we need this to be a constitution, and we need to address religious issues and this and that. And he's like, I am doing the heavy lifting. I am Sisyphus. I'm short, but I'm strong. I am declaring a nation state for the Jewish people for the first time in over 2,000 years. And you want me to get involved in your inter-Hasidic, tribal warfare? I'm not doing it. Work it out.
Right.
I'm doing the big thing. Well, here we are, gosh, I wish he'd done more, but I think we definitely need Jewish engagement and involvement.
Nothing that worries you about diaspora Jews getting more involved, raising their voices. And what about the idea?
No, uninformed, yes. Uninformed, yes. Informed,
okay.
No.
So what about what I spoke about right at the beginning, which is the role of synagogues and federations? Talk to me for a moment as a rabbi, right? We have congregants here who believe that these protests are unjust and they are pro-judicial reform. Should synagogues and federations be speaking for or against the protests, or should we be staying out of it, telling our members to get informed for themselves, make up their own minds? What would you counsel?
How would I counsel you, Rabbi?
Yeah.
I always understood that Judaism is a religion, it's a national identity, and it's a culture. And perhaps other people feel differently. Perhaps they're so religious, and many are, that they feel there is no place for nationhood and culture in the discussion. But you just, to me, you can't separate. You can't. And so as a rabbi, I suppose it's challenging. I think it's interesting to hear that you have congregants who feel very strongly and support judicial reform. And I'd love to have a chat with them and find out what about it they support. There is going to be greatly expanded scope for religious courts and reduced scope for civilian justice or civil justice. Women's rights are, I don't care how you put it, they are threatened. Minority rights.
You know the age we're living in now, Vivian. There's no truth and there's no false. So people believe what they're told.
Fine. Do they like democracy?
That's the constituency of Federation. That's the constituency of many of our synagogues. So is it worth, do you think, communal leadership, let's put it that way, taking firm stands on this issue?
I think that, I think yes. Every congregation is going to have its flavor. I think that if people really took what's going on in Israel and transposed it onto this environment, I don't think very many would be very pro-judicial reform anymore. I think that there's a cult of Bibi that, it's very frayed in Israel now, but it's much more entrenched here. And for me, this is not about Bibi. This is about liberal democracy in Israel, full stop. Mm-hmm. And on top of all of the other really significant issues and arguments, I can tell you, because I've done this, I've spoken to many people in the Haredi, less in the Haredi, more in the religious Zionists, but enough at Haredi. And if you ask them, and I have asked them, on your issue matrix, liberal democracy or halacha, Jewish law, what is more important? And you know what the answer is?
Right.
Yes, and they're serious about it. They're not, this is not a game. And when they say, oh, we're not going to, erode democracy, I don't know. I've spoken to legal experts, left, right, and center, all of it. So I feel strongly, I feel this is existential. I feel that if we don't become informed and active and engaged, that Israel will change dramatically. And for the people who think that's great, great. I don't.
So this isn't the first time you've talked about make Aliyah, we need you. That's the real solution.
Yeah,
here.
I'm really kind of working for Sachnut here. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think you also are realistic about the chances, the slim chances of that happening. I want to, after this conversation, ask you about reasons to be optimistic. It's Sukkot. It's a holiday of joy. It's a holiday of Jewish unity.
Right.
I'm trying to find some way. Unity, I know, but I'm trying to find some way to culminate this conversation with some optimism here, and I'm struggling because, again, it all boils down to me to this problem of that growing number of Israelis who have a different vision for the country than the one you're presenting.
But that's
ideological.
It's not
well,
accurate.
This is what we're being told,
but
right?
That's not accurate. Oh,
but you yourself said 8 children per Haredi family.
That's 13% of the population. The majority of the population, including the majority of Likudniks, those are people who voted Likud and are Likud party members, the majority do not support this. There's poll after poll. What has happened in the way in which this government has sort of jammed it? Huge institutional, systemic, fundamental change through has turned a lot of its support against it.
I'm with you.
All right,
and it could be that we have another election and all this goes away,
willing,
right?
Yeah.
Well, there's talk about this Saudi Arabia peace deal collapsing the current government. So let's say it happens. We have a new election.
Yeah.
I'm talking 20 years down the road.
Okay. I'm going to be 82.
Well, hopefully you'll still be fighting and still be speaking.
Yeah.
And you're going to see a very different Israel than the one you see today, won't you? I think we've all seen in the past generation how the country's changed and the direction it's going in, and numbers don't lie. You yourself talked about the birth rate. So where is this going? Where are things going in a country where we have a growing part of the population that is ideologically one-track minded and that is economically dependent, and an increasing number of Israelis who are already starting to say, I'm not going to be the sucker that's paying the bills for all these guys for the rest of my life, and sending my kids to the army for them. So give me some reason here to challenge the direction of where things seem to be heading over the next few decades.
We want a Disney ending. Okay. I'm working hard here. I love Walt Disney.
As I said, this is a community that was tied in, and to tell me there's no happy ending, to tell me that this isn't going somewhere, that we're headed towards a disaster, it's a fundamental challenge.
It could be hurtling head on. But I know, I'll work with you here, seriously.
Okay.
Because look, I'm out there, like I live there, and I'm out there fighting. And I fight with words, and I'm not doing that like for fun. It's not fun, to be honest. So I think that there is tremendous optimism, or we wouldn't be fighting. And I don't agree that the Haredim are fundamentalist religious. There is no ideology other than religion there. So I don't agree with the way you phrased it, that they're kind of ideologically committed and the numbers. So that 13%, they can continue to be as devout as they want, but it's just kind of like you live in a country, you got to live up to certain civic. You like roads and bridges as much as me. You got to do national service and you got to work. And you can pray all the rest of your time. I don't care. Nobody cares. Nobody wants to take their religion away from them. And so optimism, I think that there's a lot more common ground amongst the majority of Israelis who, like in most places, want an economically prosperous and harmonious society. Okay, and I think that the major challenges are the 400,000 or so in the West Bank. I do, because they have a very entrenched way of looking at the Palestinian issue, and they are very ideological. Mm-hmm. I think the rest of Israel is actually, pretty reasonable. They're going to go from right to left, but they're going to be pretty reasonable. So, we need something to break the logjam. And frankly, Bibi would like to break the law. Bibi is a moderate. Bibi's a pragmatist. This is not Bibi. Bibi, it's no secret what and right now he's in a tussle with Ben Gvir.
Right.
Right? So
he's trying to hold together a coalition with people in his government who are
extremists.
Right.
And he's given the upper hand to the extremists in his own party.
Right.
The goal, the best of Likud has left over the last 6 years. They've gone to other parties. There are 2 or 3 maybe, but Likud is not what it was. That party isn't what it was, and Bibi, he enticed extremists, and he's paying a price now. Mm-hmm. He's paying a price because he sat down with the devil. He thought he could control them because he's done it so brilliantly for the last 20 years, but he can't.
Right.
He can't. And so I think that we keep fighting. We get support, and we get a more knowledgeable and motivated diaspora, and not just diaspora, not just Jews. I interact most of the time with non-Jews when I'm here. They get it. They get the importance of Israel. Business communities, are you kidding? They get it. I've been surprised. I've actually been surprised by that. This is not a Jewish issue exclusively, by any stretch. So I'm going to be back. I'm going back on the 11th. And honestly, it's been wonderful not protesting. My daughter went back a few weeks ago. She was like, oh my gosh, Mommy, it's hot and sweaty. And then it's also hard work. But I'm going to go back and I'm going to be out there on that Saturday night and anything else that comes up. And I'm going to be writing and I'm going to be doing podcasts and I'm going to be doing everything I can to raise awareness. And I do that because I really believe and hope and will not give up. So most of the protest leaders that I know who are lawyers and doctors are saying we won't give up until it's hopeless. But they all have second passports. But they're fighting hard. Nobody wants to leave. People don't want to leave. They love this place with every fiber of their being.
I'm happy you're saying that, and I hope that that is resonating with those in attendance, that we're talking to somebody who is deeply Zionistic, who's out there fighting for the vision of Israel that she believes the world needs. And you'll see that when you watch the protests. These are not people burning the Israeli flag. They are singing Tikvah. They're waving the flag. This is a patriotic protest for a vision of the country that they believe is under threat. It's a very enlightening and informative conversation.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you, Vivian.
I have to say, though, you're not going to see a lot of Israeli flags in the Haredi communities. Just saying. They also don't celebrate Independence Day. Just saying. So I just had to. I'm sorry, but that's a really big.
I understand.
Yeah, I care deeply, and we care deeply, and we can't let this brilliant historical experiment go sideways.
So I want to take a couple of questions from the audience. Just before I do, it's always a dangerous thing to open up the floor to questions from the audience. So before I do that, please, questions, not statements or comments, right? We have Vivian here only for a limited amount of time, so please focus on asking a concise question so that we can hear from her. And I hope you enjoyed this. I hope so far that you're finding this enlightening. This is not, we're not here to promote any particular ideological vision, but to learn from somebody who has been there on the ground and who I think is promoting a more informed perspective on what's going on in the country. So you've done that in the past hour. Yeah.
And I have to say also, I have voted, like my voting, I have not voted left, but if it's center or right, I mean, I've voted a lot in Israel. I am not an ideologue. I'm not an ideologue, so just want to nip that one in the bud. I voted all over the place.
Unless it's Trudeau. No comment. Okay.
Thank you very much, Vivian. Really appreciate it. I'd like to take issue, if I could, with one thing that you had said.
Only one?
Only one. Is that I believe that Bibi is not at the whim of the extremists. Bibi is driving this. He's concerned about his own skin, his own freedom. He has to testify coming in the next couple months. Right. There have been contradictions between what he said to the police. He wants to avoid that at all costs. And if Levine has made no bones that he would fire the Attorney General. Anyways, I'd like you to comment on that.
So, I mean, that's the whole, the theory, like what's driving Bibi to do this. A lot of people who've worked with him for decades and very, very closely have turned on him. And not just randoms, like basically everyone. And look, that's one theory, that Bibi is doing all of this to save his own skin because of his, legal issues, maybe. I find that one actually hard to believe. I really do. And there is another theory that floats around, and a lot of people have started to talk about publicly, and it's true, something profound changed in 2015. He was supposed to lose that election, and he came through at the last minute. Remember, he was saying, get out and vote, all the Arabs are being bussed in by leftists, and they're going to totally control, win the elections, and so you got to get everybody get out and vote. And I don't know if it was not immaterial what he did. That was 2 days before the actual election. He got 38 out of 120. That's the equivalent of a landslide in Israel, okay? And people say, a lot of people who know him personally, it's like, living in Israel, it really is like high school, okay? It's like it's like going to Northtown on a Sunday afternoon. I walk into Northtown, I never get out. Israel's the same. Everybody knows everybody. Everything's one phone call away. so these kind of, reports and opinions are actually informed. And they say that something profound changed in him in 2015. And he really started to think, oh my gosh, this is, my destiny. I have to stay in power. He has been offered really sweet exit ramps from the legal problems and not taken them. And for what it's worth, I think there's more to it than just the legal stuff. I really do. But at the end of the day, someone else can do the psychoanalysis. I, as a citizen, don't care. What I care about is what is happening in my country.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is a very complicated issue, and I think we all agree there. And one of the suggestions you made that we have to be educated about the facts, but who's going to educate us? Like, you have a bias, and I recognize your thoughts, but how are we going to be educated that we get everybody's thoughts, legitimate thoughts?
I would say informed more than educated. And you're right, everybody has biases, and it's hard work. It's very hard work. I mean, I work hard at staying informed, and I live there. I worked hard at staying informed here, and because I'm still very engaged in certain kind of politics here. And I think that the demise of mainstream media everywhere is a huge problem. How do you do it? You start curating sources and make sure you're getting diverse sources. You start talking to people. You attend lectures. You if you have the ability to listen to media in other languages, you do that. Same way you would research, God forbid you needed a medical opinion, you would do your research, right? And get second and third opinions if you needed them. I don't have a magic pill or formula. I wish I did. I tell you, I spend a lot of my time trying to understand all points of view. I mean, I was a litigator for 25 years, and the best advice I ever got early on was, you have to understand the other side's case better than your own, so that, you can really pick it apart and really know why you believe and think what you do. It's not much, but that's the best I can do. Oh, and subscribe to my site.
I know this may sound a bit naive, but if there had been a constitution, which I know they attempted to create many times, would some of this not have passed, or would some of this not be happening now?
Absolutely.
And do you think there's ever a hope of a constitution?
Not in a Jewish country. No, we're going to have to do what we call workarounds. Yeah.
Earlier on, if I heard you correctly, you said that no doubt there is some need for judicial reform, not what is being proposed and how it is being proposed. Could you please advise us or elucidate as to how you see judicial reform should be done and what is needed to be done?
So I'm going to be, prudent, and because I've not, frankly, ever sort of sat down and thought, oh, gee, how would I? But I'll give you the broad brushstrokes. When I arrived in Israel as ambassador, and one of the first questions I had was, every 5 minutes somebody's running to the Supreme Court. Everybody. You gotta, I guess you could go run to the Supreme Court. Seriously. Anybody can go. There are no limitations. That's got to stop. Okay, so we have no discipline. It's Israel. It's everyone's running around. We need some discipline. Really simple stuff that doesn't require sort of, constitutional overhaul. We need proper appeal courts. We don't even have proper appeal. It's a gong show, honestly. Number one. So that was one. Wait, there's no process. Israelis hate process. They just don't do process. They don't do governance. They don't like that stuff. So they're always working around. The other thing, for example, Bibi's trial. I'm sure you've all asked yourselves, why is this thing still going on? It's never going on for the last decade? And the answer is kind of yeah. And you see this all. He'll have his trial, right? And they go in for a day. And here you have a criminal trial. It starts and it finishes, and that's it. As long as it takes, you sit. There, it's okay, so, we're going to come back next week. No, my bar mitzvah, my kid, my this. I'm telling you, and then I'm going abroad for 3 weeks. It's unbelievable. This is what goes on in criminal trials. So I would give you another thing. I would say the criminal justice system, kaboom, discipline. You start, you finish, and I could go on and on. Civil system, same thing. I would very much circumscribe the rabbinate, the chief rabbinate. I mean, we're kind of at Israel 2.0. Are we going to be a serious state, institutionally as well, and act like a mature state and have courts of law? You can opt out here and go to the Beit Din. You can opt out here and go to Sharia law courts. But if you're participating in this society, you have to accept certain foundational norms. So that's my kind of, since I'm just spitballing here, but those are some really easy, in my view, non-controversial issues that need to be dealt with.
Okay. Shirley Ann, you gonna be nice?
So, on Yom Kippur, we were very fortunate to have two veterans from the Yom Kippur War, and they spoke. One supported the protests, but the other one said, the war was awful. We almost lost Israel. And here in Toronto, we were petrified at that time that we were going to lose during the Yom Kippur War. So the other veteran said, we can have different opinions. In fact, we have lots of different opinions, and that's okay.
Right.
But we can perhaps solve different problems in different ways. We are exposing ourselves by having these protests. We're weakening our state, our country, and the Iranians, for example, our enemies, are smelling blood. And the Iranians right now are involved in the West Bank and in Lebanon and with the Hamas, and it's with 150,000 rockets in the north. It's dangerous. Can we not solve this problem a different way? I understand that Bibi did try to communicate with the protesters, but the protesters don't want any part of it. And that Ehud Barak, is one of the people who is standing strong and taking a stand, and with his financiers and leading the way. So perhaps you can comment on this.
So there's a lot, thank you. There's a lot in there. I'll just go with the last bit first. I think that it's fair to say that the coalition government has been less than interested in negotiating, speaking any form of compromise. When they paused, late March, when Bibi fired Yoav Gallant, Minister of Defense, and people went kind of, crazy, myself included. Not really crazy, but we were all out there within 20 minutes. It was just like unbelievable what happened. It was, you felt history happening. It was probably the most dramatic night so far in these protests. And then, Bibi ended up putting him back, and he didn't really sort of totally, properly, technically fire him, but he fired him, and he had to backtrack on that. And then they said, we're going to pause. We're going to, because, it's Israel, we like our holidays, right? Like, Rome can be burning, but we like our holidays. So we're going to pause for a couple months, and we're going to do Pesach, and then we're going to come back in May, and we're going to go to the president's house, and we're all going to talk and negotiate, and we're going to see if we can come to some kind of, consensus. And that had been going on in fits and starts since the beginning of February. Do you know what the Likudniks, do you know what Yariv Levin did the very next day? Itamar Ben-Gvir. They came out in Hebrew in press, and they're like, sure, we'll go, we'll sit and talk. And you know what? And if we don't reach an agreement, which we won't, then we'll just come back and we'll go at it, more forcefully. We'll ram it through harder. That's not how a responsible government, without, in my view, a legitimate mandate to completely overhaul the judicial system, behaves. So that's apropos of the comment about, Bibi and his efforts at negotiating compromise. With respect to, the question you ask is, okay, this is bad, and we've got Hezbollah. You know that Nasrallah and I have the same birthday, too. He just turned 63. So you've got Hezbollah, you've got Iran, you've got a lot of people looking around and smacking their lips. And I guarantee you, I assure you that those thoughts are, I'm out, these are elite soldiers and combat pilots. Like, these are serious people. And don't think for a second that we are not constantly aware of that. But that is because this is so darn important. It doesn't get closer to the bone than will we do everything possible to preserve liberal democracy in this country? We don't have time to be polite, and we don't have any other way of expressing and expressing our views. And you know, last time I was here, somebody asked me this question. It was, I had been, let go, relieved of my responsibilities by Prime Minister Trudeau, because I was a Harper appointee when I was ambassador. And I chose, for a number of personal reasons, to stay. And one of them was, my daughter and I had, frankly, I'd sold my house. We'd anticipated being there much longer, and it ended rather abruptly. And we were very content. We were very happy. And, she was just finding her way, and it was a great experience. So we're like, no, we're going to stay. So I'm staying. Well, I want to be able to vote, and I need medical care. So we made Aliyah. Obviously, there was more to it than that. And somebody in this room, or the other room, where we were last time, said to me, well, when you do that, Vivian, don't you think that you give fuel to the anti-Semites? Us, because their big line from me from day one, even before anyone knew what I was or anything, was that I was disloyal and I was a secret agent for the Mossad and the Israeli government, and disloyal to Canada and acting in, dual loyalty. It's an old trope. And so this person asked me, very well-meaning question, by staying, don't you play into their hands? And I'm like, I'm supposed to live my life trying to satisfy these people who are going to hate me no matter what? They just hate me because of what I am and who I am. I'm supposed to live and try to come back to Toronto, be here in the winter, so that people won't say I'm disloyal to Canada. It's the same thing now. That was too important for me. I was staying in Israel. I was being true to my beliefs, my deepest beliefs. And what is going on in the streets now, people are really deciding, am I going to stay or am I going to go? And they don't want to leave. This is the cream. These are the best. These are the people who serve. These are the people who work. I've got friends who are on the front lines every week in these protests, and their sons were drafted in August. There are 3 big draft months in Israel: August, November, and March. They're sending their kids. And their kids may be taking orders from God knows who. From people who are saying, we should burn down all of Huwara in the West Bank. So, no, I think that this is 1948, and we don't have the luxury of doing this in any other way. And I'd love to hear from you at some point after what other way, like if there was a way we could do it quietly and be effective. I think a lot of people would love to hear it, but I don't know what that is. And there are a lot of great, one of the reasons this protest movement has been so powerful, is because, and I know how it started. I did a podcast with one of the guys who literally started it on a layover, one of the big groups in Vienna. His flight was delayed. And it was it's a great story. And if you're on my site, you would know it. And it's a podcast. And he said to me, he was a Sayeret Matkalnik. So from Sayeret Matkal was an elite IDF combat unit. Still exists. Bibi was in it. Everybody was in it. Barak was in it. And this guy was a commander and served well into his 50s. In fact, he still serves. Doesn't have to anymore by law. These people still serve into the 50s and the 60s. And he said to me, we are the most brilliant, and he's not an arrogant guy, capable minds. We win wars. We keep an enemy at bay against all odds every single day. We are the most creative, resourceful. We don't understand. No, it can't be done. And we're going to fight to the end. They are formidable. not adversaries. What's the word I want? They're a force of nature, these guys and women. And you know what? I hope you get to Israel soon. Call me up. We'll go out on a Saturday night date. I'll take you for beer and pizza after. I know the best place, and you'll feel it. It's life-changing what's going on.
Shirley Ann, you're going to go to the protest? Just two last questions.
Thank you. Sort of following up what you were saying, why is it with our supposedly creative Jewish minds, we haven't been able to work out something similar to a form of to use lack of a better term, a national unity government that would give Bibi a get out of jail free card? Why have we not been able to create that result?
I think if you stay tuned, we may do it really, really soon. Bibi has been handed a number of really good get out of jail free cards. He has, like a lot of, and he's like, no. And that's where I think this kind of like destiny thing starts to come in. Like he feels he must be, but you know, who knows? But let's just say between the Saudi thing and Ben Gvir and the Haredim kind of realizing, you know, that every once in a while they come out and they say, he lied to us, Bibi lied. No, that's never happened. Bibi told us we were going to get X and he's not delivering. You know, there's going to come a point where, and it's already happening, like, you know, Aryeh Deri was saying, like, maybe I should go be talking to Benny Gantz. Like, you know, these guys, they are great deal makers, okay? So when if, you know, over the next few months, who knows with Saudi, who knows if Ben Gvir feels like, you know what, I'm out of here, Bibi keeps humiliating me, I can't take it anymore. The Haredim walk because they're like, we're not going to get it. And if we keep supporting Bibi, we're going to really be in big trouble next election. But if there was an election held tomorrow, it's poll after poll after poll for months. It's going to be Benny Gantz. And tell you, I'm voting Benny. I never voted Benny before. I would vote for Benny this time. I never would have thought that I would vote for Benny. But Benny, he's a grown-up. He's not too much in either way. He's respected, you know, as a general. Like, so interesting. A lot of Mizrahim voted for Benny, you know, 2 elections ago. Everyone, we thought, this is over. Benny's done. And then, like Magic Man, he comes out with like 8 mandates or something. What happened, right? And you know, my anecdotal thing on that is that, because my daughter has a lot of Mizrahi friends, and she says, like, Mommy, all of their whole families, they were all hardcore Likudniks. And in that election, a huge chunk of them moved over and they voted Benny. Really? Like Ashkenaz, blonde, blue-eyed, 6'2" Benny? Like, what am I not getting? And you know why? They couldn't hold their nose and vote for Likud anymore. They couldn't vote for Yair Lapid. They felt he was too centrist and not traditional enough. And Benny's a nice guy. You know, and he's a nice guy. And Benny is going to bring everything together. So, you know, Bezrat Hashem, and this is your Disney ending too, there's nothing we'd like more, I certainly wouldn't like more than elections tomorrow. And I actually think Bibi might even be a little relieved too.
This is a 2-parter.
Oy.
First from me, you touched on it, anti-Semitism. So to all the people who absolutely loathe Bibi and use him as an excuse to attack Jews, attack Zionists, attack apartheid, do you feel that your movement is increasing that or lessening the worldwide view of anti-Semitism? Now, before you answer,
understanding that you're a bright woman and you see...
I feel a butt coming.
No, there's never a but coming. There are a lot of people who are happy to be, you didn't want us using the word educated, to get more informed. And our hearts are in the right place. I'm sure that I know so many people, that their hearts are breaking. They want to do something shy of moving to Israel, and it does occur to some of us because you feel so strongly. What really is your advice? I don't want
You don't have to be there all year, you know. You
No,
can come
I
for a
know
few
that.
months.
We've talked about this.
Okay.
I don't want Justin Trudeau speaking for me. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't need that slap down from my country to Israel, because Israel is my first country. But what can the average Jew do? What is the avenue? We're giving money to Israel. I mean, I don't know. How do we support, if we agree with you, how could
you not?
Exactly. I understand that they may not. How do we get involved in a way that is meaningful? I mean, we're frustrated, shy of moving to Israel or joining you in for a pizza, and I'm not going to have a beer, but I will be out with my running shoes and marching. How can we really, is there a way that you can see that diaspora Jews actually can put pressure in some way that activates something in Israel?
So
it may be helping Benny.
Okay,
I don't know. Do you know
so
what I'm
that
saying?
was like a lot of stuff you just threw out, both of you. In terms of I'm going to take the last part first. How can we participate? How can we engage? How can we have an impact? You got to work at it. I mean, make a difference. It's not about writing checks. Sorry. I think that you need to become more. I mean, you should always write checks, but let me restate that. I think being informed, understanding what the various groups are doing. I mean, I can tell you now, they're all fanning out after the holidays. Like all the leaders of these groups, they're going all over North America. And I'm helping one of the guys, and he said, I need the vocabulary. His English is good, but business English. He doesn't have the vocabulary to go out and so I'm helping him kind of do the Hebrew to English thing so that he's a little more fluent. I said, what's your message? They don't know what their message is to North America. And I asked genuinely because I have been really surprised by what I've encountered here over 2 months. And the way in which I think North Americans are aware, care, express that, demonstrate it. And when you're in Israel, you're just so in it, right? You just think everybody knows all this stuff and these, the stuff I told you guys about dairy. Probably most people in here didn't know about dairy, right? I mean, can you imagine that in Canada? A criminal being put in 2 top portfolios and then finance? You'd all be going crazy. Okay, but I'm not doing that. I mean, there's a lot going on. I think that I'm talking to, people like Rabbi Grover and Federation people, and so I'm just going to leave that at that. I can't give you an answer. I answered the gentleman at the back who asked the question. There's no rule book. There's no kind of, there's no, what do I want? There's no manual for this. We're kind of all muddling our way through it over there, and we need more leadership here. I mean, I was amazed that over the holidays, it was an issue here and in the States that rabbis were speaking about the situation in Israel from the Bima. And again, I'm like, wait, aren't we a nation?
Right, and that's I was going to add to what you were saying, Vivian, and say what I've seen over the past few months is Israelis over and over again saying what you said, which is, why don't you know about dairy? Do you really know what's going on in Israel? I've seen many Israelis almost personally offended. They don't need you to do anything, but they need you to feel what they're feeling, understand the existential threat that they believe the country is under right now, and if there's a disconnect, they get really offended. And I think that's where your comment about aren't we a nation comes from. Like some of my colleagues would speak about Israel on the high holidays, and congregants will say, well, why don't you speak about something that's relevant to my life? Right? And the rabbis go, what? Israel is not relevant to your life? Democracy in Israel is not relevant to my life? So, yeah.
Their life without Israel.
Right. Right. So it's those sorts of comments. What's that? You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. I think that we live busy lives. We have a lot going on in our own lives, and sometimes we don't think enough about the bigger issues, especially ones like this, because Vivian's written this, and she's 100% right. Canadian Jews are uncomfortable with the idea of criticizing Israel. That's just not a posture that we've ever needed to assume in 75 years. We've been supporting Israel. We haven't been critical of a prime minister. We're not comfortable with it. And the fact that it might be so important right now to be a critic Israelis are finding offensive, that we're just not on that wavelength right now, given what they believe the perceived threat to be. Would you agree with me? I mean, I'm speaking also as a diaspora Jew, but I sense it in your comments that you just want people to be as passionate, to understand what's at stake, and to care. And just that is enough.
Huge. And we were at the same breakfast last week, and there was that Israeli couple, doctors, 2 doctors, 3 kids. They had spent a few years in Canada and Toronto, loved it, doing fellowships and whatever, and then went back. And they're here visiting over the holidays just because they had so many friends and they wanted to come back and visit. So, of course, our hostess said, you come here and you end up spending all your time talking to the Israelis. But, I have new best friends now. But they're talking, these 2 doctors, of leaving. They have 3 children. These people are amazing people. And one of the things we were talking about so much was exactly what the rabbi's saying. I said, can you wrap your head around what? And they're shocked. They're shocked that people just don't seem to know.
Right.
The gravity. They don't seem to understand the gravity of this moment. And if I may, when I was ambassador, there was this, study group of, Toronto Jews, and I grew up with their kids, okay? And so I speak to them every now and then, and I host them at my house, the residents. And this was before the election when Prime Minister Trudeau had his landslide victory. It was April, and they were very concerned, and they said to me, and I had to be careful, of course, I'm a political appointee, but I'm also, Canada's ambassador, right? So I can't get too funky with this. And they asked me, they said, Viv, we're really worried. What do we do? What if the libs get in? What's their view on Israel? And all that kind of stuff. And I said, well, I'll tell you, it's April and summer's coming. And if you're really worried and you care and you have strong views, then get involved. Because the door knocking and the stamp licking and all the drudgery of politics is not for somebody else to do. It's for you to do. I always told my kids, and I still do, voting isn't enough. That's just a start. Democracy is a lot of hard work. It's hard work. It's a lot of heavy lifting, and it's not for somebody else to do. So I said, skip a weekend at the golf club or the cottage. Just one. Start there. And give, I don't care what party you support. I really don't. But just do it. And get in the mix and get messy. And I would say the same thing here. Step by step, every day, you can set yourself little goals. Mm-hmm. Get messy, get in the mix, and you'll find, the momentum will come, and you'll find your way through it all. A lot of the groups, if you don't support the protest, sure, send your money to Likud. If you do, you find a group that you support, whether it's a women's group, whether it's a secular group, a traditional Judaism group, Reform Judaism. There are a lot of voices that could use support.
Very good. Well, thank you deeply to former Canadian Ambassador Vivian Bercovici. Insightful, sharp, passionate, direct.
Stateoftelaviv.com.
Stateoftelaviv.com. Please follow her. This isn't the last you've heard of her. We're so pleased that you came back to Beth Tikvah.
Thank you for having me
again. You made our
again.
Sukkot very, very special. Added a new dimension to this discussion, and thanks everybody for being here.
Thank you all.